So my journey with credit started probably around the age of like 19 or 20. So my first credit card was Victoria's Secret. So you know how they typically get you at retail stores by saying, oh, if you sign up for, a credit card, you can receive like, I don't know, an extra percentage off. So, I'm 19, 20, so I'm like, bet, sign me up. So that was my very first credit card. So I used it every once in a while. I would say when I was 19 or 20, like Victoria's Secret was like my place. Like it was popping. I used to go, I would say probably at least like once a month to get different body products, bras, panties, like whatever. So I was there. So I was, purchasing, on my credit card. I would pay it off every month because, growing up, my parents didn't really talk to us about like credit cards necessarily or really credit in general. I just would hear, from friends and family that essentially like credit cards were the devil. But, that discount was enticing. So I was like, let me sign up for this credit card. So I would swipe it, pay it off every month. And so that was like my first introduction. So I feel like I was, fairly responsible there. So graduated from college, and then I started working, and I noticed, my coworkers would talk about what credit cards they had. And so this was like 2014, 2015. So this was when I think travel, credit cards were gaining popularity. And so I had a coworker that, like whenever we went out to eat, he always like offered to pay. And I knew he was going to run it through. Like it wasn't actually coming out of his pockets, but he was like, yeah, like I get points for like dining. And I'm like, points? Like I had no clue like how this worked, because Victoria's Secret, you don't get points. It's literally like, standard basic credit card. So he was explaining, the perks that came along with his credit card. And I'm like, bet, like I should get a credit card. So ended up signing up for the Chase Sapphire Preferred, because the Reserve hadn't existed just yet. So signed up for that. They had a dope sign up bonus. I think it was something like, I want to say my sign on bonus was like $1,500. That was the cash amount, but I think the equivalent in points was like 100,000 points, or like 150,000. It was, again, right when Chase was introducing the Sapphire cards. And so they had like really good sign-on bonuses. So I was like hooked, but I always like use my credit cards responsibly, because I am honestly pretty frugal and cheap. I don't like paying interest. I don't like paying fees. I don't like paying anything more than like what I'm supposed to pay for. So was using it essentially as a debit card. That's still how I use my credit cards now. And that's what I highly recommend, is that you're only swiping like literally what you can actually afford. So if you know that you can't afford it, you should not be swiping it on your credit card. Again, same concept as a debit card. If your debit card only had $20 in it, you wouldn't go and make, a $100 purchase, because then you'd be overdrawn. So you should really treat your credit card the exact same way. So all throughout my 20s, I essentially had one credit card, that, Chase card. Ended up upgrading to the Reserve once that came out, because I was like, that's, the perks were better. It's like, why not? And then I ended up getting another credit card. So again, at work, I was having conversations with my coworkers, and one of my coworkers was just saying how she has like 10 credit cards. And I was like, oh my God, like, why do you have so many? Like, what is the purpose? And she was like, yeah, like when a new credit card comes out and they have like a really good introductory deal, like I hop on it. And I was like, but isn't that hurting your credit score? Like with so many different like hits and inquiries. And she was like, no, not really, because what it's doing is it allows me to increase my credit limit. So every new card that I'm getting, it's increasing my credit limit. And so because I now have access to more credit, I'm able to get my credit card usage down, which actually helps my score. And I was like, wow, like I never thought about having more than one credit card, more than one everyday credit card, I should say. And I was like, that's actually like super smart. So at the time, I applied for my second credit card, which was, I think I have the Capital One Quicksilver. That was my next card. Just an aside, Capital One Quicksilver, I think it's a dope introductory card. No annual fees. When you travel, it's a Visa card. When you travel, no foreign transaction fees. And it has 1.5 times the points. So if you're interested in the Capital One card, let me know. We can both get a bonus. But yeah, back to the story. So I got a Capital One card, and then I had ended up in a period where I knew I was going to, be spending like a good chunk of money. And Chase had introduced another card, and I was like, oh, that has a nice little, introductory bonus. So let me apply for this other card. And so altogether now I have 3 credit cards. And truthfully, like, I can probably have more, but I think for right now, like, I just want to like manage what I have and get back to just like more normalized spending, because my credit score took a hit when I purchased my house. So I started looking for properties back in 2020, like the summer of the pandemic. And so, of course, before you even start shopping, you should get pre-approved, like I've already mentioned in previous videos. And so as a part of the pre-approval process, they run a credit inquiry, and it's a hard inquiry because they, again, want to know your history. They want to know, what your debt to income ratio is. They want to know how much credit you've already been extended. Like, they want to know everything. So they're going to run a hard inquiry. So got my first, hit in June of 2020 when I started shopping for houses. And I had a long journey. I mean, y'all know the housing market was bananas back when the pandemic hit. And I mean, it still is in some places. And then on top of that, like, I was looking for a multifamily property. So it was even harder because there's a lot fewer multifamily properties than there are single family properties. So, long story short, my property search was long. I didn't actually end up closing on a property until March of 2022. So I had been searching for almost 2 years for a property. So because of that, your pre-approval is only good for so long. Honestly, I don't know exactly how long it's good for, but it expires, quote unquote, at a certain point. So your realtor, your mortgage broker, they'll work with you on the details, but you should get it refreshed like every now and again, just to, make sure it's up to date, so that should you find a property, you can execute the deal relatively easy. So I had to get, I think I had to get like 3 different pre-approvals over the course of my property search, which was, like I said, a little bit over 2 years. I think there is a rule where if you get inquiries within, I want to say it's like 6 months of each other, it won't impact your score as much, if at all. But if the inquiries are spaced out beyond a period of 6 months, then it will. And so that's unfortunately the bucket that I was in. So I already started seeing my score decline. So I would say throughout, my 20s, I was able to maintain a credit score of anywhere from like 775 to, I think my highest was like 795. So I was like in that range for most of my adulthood. But then once I started getting the pre-approval hard hits to my credit, it started to like decline. And then once I actually closed on my house, I didn't think it was going to decline. I was like, okay, I'm good, because it didn't actually hit until, I would say, it was probably a smooth like 3 or 4 months after I closed on the house, where, my mortgage finally got reported to like the different credit bureaus. And so that's when my score like tanked. I think it went from, at the time, I want to say when I closed, it was around like a 770, 760. And then it dipped to like a 725. And as somebody who, I was like very prudent about taking care of my credit. Like, I have 100% on-time payments. Again, I don't carry a balance. I pay my credit card off every single month. So like when that happened, I was kind of like freaking out. And then I had to renovate. And so I put all of that on my credit cards because I was like, points. And I knew I had the money in the bank in my savings to like pay my credit cards off. And so what I did was I financed like all of my improvements, or at least what I could. And then I took advantage of what's called a balance transfer. So your credit card company, if you're carrying a fairly high balance, I think that they start soliciting when your balance is probably around like $2,000 or $3,000. They'll send you, an offer saying, oh, do you want to take advantage of, a balance transfer? And so what that is you can opt to transfer your balance, and you have to have more than one credit card. You have to have at least two to do this. So you can transfer your balance from one credit institution to another at like a fixed fee. It's typically like, 2-3% of your balance. And then you get to take advantage of either zero interest, that's like the most popular balance transfer, or at a lower interest rate. So my balance transfer offers were at zero interest. And so I was like, oh, bet, like I'm for sure taking advantage of that. And so I did. And so my first balance transfer that I took advantage of was with Chase. So I transferred my balance from my Capital One cards over to my Chase card because it was 0% interest for a year. And so I was like, bet, I can keep my savings intact, and I can let that money stack. I can keep my investments, keep earning, dividend income and interest on that. And I can be making money instead of having to deploy all my capital to pay, my balances off. So did that. And I only recommend you do this when A, the balance transfer is 0% interest, B, the balance transfer does not collect interest or does not put you in a situation where your new purchases are collecting interest. So this is where Chase got me. When I did my balance transfer, I was like, oh, 0% interest on the transfer, like sold, I'm in. The fine print though is all of my new purchases that I was making on that credit card, they started to accumulate interest immediately. So typically when you have a credit card, you have an interest-free period to the end of your billing cycle and then up until that payment is due. When you do a balance transfer with Chase, that goes away. That interest-free privilege goes away for new purchases. So I was just like using my Chase credit card as normal after the balance transfer and noticed that I was accumulating interest. And I was like, why the heck do I have interest? Like they told me the balance transfer was 0%. I'm still paying, my balances on time for my new purchases. Like this isn't making sense. So called them up. And then they explained that to me and I was like, oh, bet. So stopped using that Chase card and was like, I'm just going to use my Capital One card until I'm done with the balance transfer period because y'all super played me. So I would say don't do balance transfers with Chase. Like they're not it. Capital One then sent me an offer for a balance transfer. So same thing. It was like a fixed fee. It was like, 2 to 3% of my credit card balance. But they keep your interest-free period when it comes to new purchases. So I was able to still maintain, and use my credit card as usual, paying off my, they call it an interest-free balance. So whatever your new purchases are minus like whatever, you transferred over. And so I took advantage of that. So that's why I say Capital One, like highly recommend. I think Chase, when it comes to customer service and their products, I think that they have gone down. And so it's super important, like when you're shopping for a credit card, like make sure you read reviews on like that specific company's like customer service. I would say Chase used to have great customer service, but they've gone down. Anyways, so the mistakes that I made overall were I I can't say it was a mistake. It was just kind of, I guess, a necessary evil to get my house. But having multiple hard inquiries on your credit, that's going to inevitably lower your score. So typically hard inquiries stay on your credit for about 2 years and then they drop off. So that's another reason why my credit score has now like boosted, is because those hard inquiries that I had back in 2020, they're completely gone. Second is I did the balance transfer and didn't really fully understand what I was getting myself into. So I was accumulating interest. Now that didn't impact my score because I paid it on time. So that didn't impact my score, but I wasted money essentially on paying interest that I didn't need to pay because I didn't fully understand the details. And then I would say because I did those balance transfers, my balance stayed high. So my credit card usage stayed high. So for nearly 2 years straight, my credit card usage was at like 30% because I had financed a lot of my improvements and then just ended up through balance transfers and then just ended up paying it at the end. So I would say for me, I knew I wasn't going to need my credit anytime soon. And so while it sucked to see that it was like low, I knew that it was going to bounce back up because I knew I had, the resources to pay off the balance transfer. And then I knew the credit inquiries were going to drop off. But if you still like need to actively use your credit, it's really important for you to keep your credit card utilization or usage like low. Keep that percentage. So people used to say try to keep it below 30%. And I think 30% is like the high range of like the good range. But really you should try and keep it below like 10% because 10% is the high end of the excellent range. And we want excellent credit scores, right? So if you can, try and keep your credit card usage sub 10%. Honestly, life is happening. Emergencies happen. We can't always do that. So give yourself some grace. But try and make that a habit. Also, I would say getting more credit cards, especially if you understand how to use them responsibly, is the cheat code for actually boosting your credit score. So the more credit cards you get, the more lines of credit that you're extended. So your available credit is going to keep going up, which allows you to use more credit and keep your usage lower. So caveat that with, if you're getting a new credit card that has, let's just say, a $5,000 limit, that does not mean go out and spend $5,000. Again, we're using our credit cards with the same concept of a debit card. And that means if we can pay for it with by the end of the due date, then we can swipe. But if we know we can't afford it, if we know, our money is looking funny from our paychecks, we're not swiping. And I think that is the misconception about credit cards. Like a lot of people view them as like these short-term loans. They are short-term loans, but that's not how you should be using them because credit cards have some of like the highest interest that you're going to pay. And so if you actually do need a loan, you'll be a lot better served, going to your local bank, credit union, or wherever and getting a short-term loan that's going to have a much lower interest rate than a credit card would. So just make sure you're responsibly using your credit card like a debit card. If it's not in your checking account, if you know you can't pay the bill, that means we're not swiping. And I think that's how you'll avoid late fees. That's how you'll avoid accumulating a bunch of interest. That's how people stay in debt, in credit card debt, is because they're spending what they don't have on that credit card and they're not able to pay off the balance. And so it's snowballing. You're accumulating interest on top of interest on top of interest. And that's how, unfortunately, we stay in debt. And so please don't think credit cards are, evil. I think they are a necessary evil to build your credit score and, you know, to be able to finance a house, to be able to finance a car. Like cash is really king. That's like the wealth cheat code. People say credit is king, but really cash is king. But in Biden's 2024 economy, with inflation and prices running rampant the way they are, like, who can really afford, you know, a car in cash? Who can really afford a house in cash? Most of us can't. So we're forced to be in a financing situation. And so the better your credit score is going to be, the better interest rate you're going to get. So if you're shopping for a brand new car, if your credit score is shot, you're going to have double-digit interest rates on to finance a car. And a car, as we all know, is a depreciating asset. It's not serving us very much. It's a liability, and it's a depreciating asset. So you're getting double hit. So it's like, why pay any more money than you need to for a depreciating asset? Make sure your credit score is where it needs to be so that you can take advantage of lower interest rates. Same thing with a house. A lot of first-time home buyer programs, or just buyer assistance programs in general, they require minimum credit scores. A lot of them, I would say your credit score needs to be at least a 650 to 680 if you want to realistically take advantage of the best programs that are out there and get the best interest rates on your house. Because you're hearing about high interest rates. Oh, the Fed, you know, hiked up. I think interest rates are around, I believe, like 6% or so. But if you have a terrible credit score, your interest rate could be like 7 or 8%. It's going to be a little bit higher. And I think on paper, these numbers, like when you hear, oh, what's the difference between, you know, 6% or 7%? 1% of a finance that is, I don't know, $500,000, like that adds up over time, especially when you're talking like a 30-year mortgage. That actually adds up very, very quickly. So make sure that you're taking care of your credit score, because in, you know, today's economy, we're forced to be able to finance, or we're forced to finance things in order to be able to actually afford it. And so unless you're blessed to, you know, make enough money to pay for things in cash, you're going to be stuck financing larger purchases. And so having a great credit score allows you to take advantage of so many different promotional offers, including no interest. So when you're buying appliances, for example, or you're buying furniture, there are stores that will say, you know, if you have, you know, a certain credit score, will allow you an interest-free period of 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, 36 months. But again, you can only take advantage of that stuff if you have like a decent credit score. So all in all, please make sure you're paying your credit cards on time. So by the due date. Some people say if you pay between like 15 days after your bill cycle and 15 days like before your due date. So basically split up your payment into 2. That can also help boost your score. I've personally done that and I've never really seen any boost. And so I personally don't believe in paying anybody before they actually need to be paid. So I typically pay my bills on the due date. But again, you got to be diligent and make sure you're budgeting your funds and that the funds are there so that on the due date, you're not forgetting. Please make sure you do not forget to pay missed payments. They're the number one ding on your credit score. So like I mentioned before, typically the credit bureaus don't find out about late payments until 30 days after you've missed your due date. So don't panic if you know you're a few days late past your due date. Don't practice doing that because you're going to get charged a late fee. But don't panic in terms of it like impacting your score. You have a bit of a grace period. But if you need to, so many places allow you to schedule your payment. Schedule it for the due date so that you don't forget. Set a reminder on your phone. Like, do what you need to do to make sure that you're paying your credit cards on time. You're paying your bills, period, on time, because all of that gets reported to the credit bureaus. It's great if you are blessed to be on auto pay. I am not in that congregation. I try and keep my money for as long as possible until, like I said, it's actually due. So make sure you're paying your cards on time. So hopefully this is helpful to y'all. Again, if you have questions about like your specific credit situation, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions as I'm able. And yeah, hopefully overall y'all learned something from this, or learned what not to do from my experience. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. All right, I will see y'all later.